All right, so tonight, chapters 14 and 15, we're at this period in the book of Revelation where we're now beginning to come to the light at the end of the tunnel. Last time we saw the rise of Antichrist, and it wasn't just one person, it was actually two people that are going to rise up in the last days to lead the world into a terrible time of tribulation. And we're going to see in chapter 17 that those two are actually aided by a worldwide organization that is going to give them a moral authority to do what they're doing, so to speak. It's going to be an interesting 3 chapters when we get there, because actually the story or the narrative about this coming harlot of chapter 17 takes up actually 2 chapters. So it's a lot of information that God wants to give us about that. But tonight we're going to see the prelude. It's sort of a intermission, so to speak, where God is now going to begin to move in and take over and declare to us how he's going to take dominion over the earth. Chapter 14 and 15 are wonderful, wonderful chapters. And God never lets us get too far away from the reality that this book is really about him. Not about the Antichrist. It's not about the plagues. It's not about any of that. Those are things that occur, but it's really an unveiling of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's a discussion, it's a book about his return to the earth to take dominion over this earth. You know, there were 24 seconds left in the game, barely enough time for the Vikings players to dump Gatorade on their coach to celebrate their pending win. Trailing the Vikings, the Cowboys quarterback, Roger Staubach, needed a miracle like no other. On the 4th down play, Staubach launched the ball in the air towards wide receiver Drew Pearson. Against impossible odds, Pearson caught the 50-yard pass and waltzed right into the end zone to win the game for the Cowboys, shocking the Minnesota crowd, sending the Cowboys to the NFC Championship game. When interviewed after the game, Staubach explained, "I just closed my eyes and prayed that he would catch the ball. And the Hail Mary pass was born." Have you ever heard of the Hail Mary pass? That's where it came from. You know, we've seen in previous chapters how Satan has been empowering the Antichrist and is empowering the false prophet. He's going to empower, in the future chapters that we're going to see, a organization that the Bible calls the harlot, Mystery Babylon. So Satan himself is energizing to unprecedented evils in the world through his minions. And of course, all the destruction that comes as a result of his control over the world. It's as if in some way Satan's hoping for one of these Hail Mary passes, right? But that's not going to happen, because in this chapter, chapter 14, we're reminded once again that the victory is the Lord's. That the victory is the Lord Jesus Christ. We just need to remember that. You know, when things get bad, when we look out around us and we see the world falling apart sometimes, or even our own lives coming apart, we've got to remember, we've got to remind ourselves, the Lord has already won the victory. It's already secure. And this book is telling us how he's going to take control of his creation and purge evil from his domain once and for all. God does not let us get very far from the reality that he intends to put his son on the throne. And so chapter 14, we're going to see the preview of the redeemed and the judgment of the lost. Now, we're given it as if it's already happened in this chapter 14, because in reality, it already has happened. God has already secured the victory. We have already received the seal of our reward in the Holy Spirit. The just will be rewarded, and those that are rebellious will be judged. That is a certainty. You remember what God said in Isaiah 46. He said, "For I am God, there is no other. I am God, there is none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done. saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. See, there's no Hail Mary pass for the devil here, because we see the victory of the Lamb in chapter 24. So let's take a look at verse 1. Chapter 14, verse 1. Then I looked, and behold, a Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written on their forehead. And so now we see the Lamb. He's not in heaven, is he? Where did we see the Lamb before? He was at the throne of God, wasn't he? But now it says he's standing on Mount Zion. Well, where is Mount Zion? What is that? What did you say, honey?
Israel?
Okay, Mount Zion is in Israel. Mount Zion is a place. Mount Zion is a geographical location, and it just happens to be in Israel. Mount Zion is in Israel. Why is the Lord standing on Mount Zion in Jerusalem? Why is he there? Why isn't he in somewhere place else? That's where it's all going to end up. You're absolutely right. That's where the capital of the world is going to be someday. It's going to be in Jerusalem. God is going to reign and dwell there. And that's why the Lamb is standing on Mount Zion, because it's looking forward to the time when he's going to return to the earth. His feet are going to touch down on the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives are going to cleave in two, and he's going to establish his headquarters there in Jerusalem in Mount Zion. And who's with him? The 144,000. Now, we saw these before, didn't we? Who are these 144,000? Not Jehovah's Witnesses. Guarantee you that. Who are they? Remember them? What are they?
12 sons from all the 12 tribes.
Okay, they're 12,000 from every tribe of Israel. And what was their role during the tribulation period? They were to be witnesses for the Lord, right? They were to be God's evangelists in the world. And notice they're there with him. They made it all the way through. These were sealed. Remember at the beginning of the tribulation, and that sealing meant that they were secure. They were safe. God had protected them through the entire tribulation period, brought them through. Now they're standing with him as a reward for their faithfulness. Now, does everybody that trusts in the Lord make it through the tribulation alive like that? No, they don't. Not everybody.
Oh, no, they martyred.
Not everybody. But these do. These do. Now, if you were to pick a capital of the world, would you pick Jerusalem? Has anybody ever been to Jerusalem? I've been to Jerusalem. It looks just like that, actually. Not much different today than it did, back when. Why did God pick Jerusalem? Why did God pick Mount Zion to be the place for his glory to dwell? It's what?
Where it all started.
It's where it's all started? Okay. But he started it there, right?
Right.
He's the one that picked it.
Right.
Right? Why did he pick it?
Because they were Jews.
Okay, they were Jews, but
Because he's God, and that's where he wanted to do it. Yeah.
that's right. That is the answer. Claudia got it. Because he wanted to choose Jerusalem. Most people wouldn't choose Jerusalem. If you ever go there, it's just this rocky, hilly, kind of a hot, humid sort of place. I've been there, and that's not my favorite place to be. I would much rather be on the coast, like Caesarea or Carmel, and there, on the coast in the Mediterranean. Much more pleasant. Jerusalem, not so pleasant. But God picked it. That's where he wants to
When were
be.
you there again? What month?
When was I there?
Yeah.
I was in August.
Okay. Yeah, it was hot.
Yeah, it was in August. It was hot. It was hot there. It was humid there. It was windy at times. A storm came through and blew down some trees, and it was like, meh. After about 3 weeks, I wanted to come home. It wasn't a place for me to be. I did not like it there. So,
3 weeks or 3 days?
3 weeks. I was there for an archaeological dig in 1977, and I was there for 3 weeks digging in tombs of all places. 78? 78.
Rachel was 11 months
That's
old.
right. I was digging in tombs in a city called Ramallah, which is the north of Jerusalem, actually where the location is where Joshua, when he first came up from Jericho to come into the land, he came up this valley and went to a town called Ai, and that's where his second battle took place, Joshua's. Well, we were working right there and digging right there, and I was standing looking down the valley that Joshua came up, and it was such an amazing feeling to be looking at that, and know that this was where Joshua and the army came up to attack Ai, and we were digging right where that town was at some point in the past. So it was very interesting. But we were there, and it was not a nice place for me to be. I didn't like it that much. It was really hot and dry.
Did you find anything when you were digging?
We did. We started digging, and we first found Byzantine structures. Byzantine was right after the early church time, 300, 400, 500 AD. The Byzantine Empire kind of took over that area. They built churches and things. And we discovered it was a vineyard. And this was a wine creating location. But we kept digging. We got down and we found Roman artifacts. We found a Roman sword. We found a bag of Roman coins. We found Roman lamps. And we found Roman pottery. And it was very interesting. We kept digging. We got down and we started finding artifacts from the Canaanite period, from before Joshua came in to the land. And it was about that time that the Hebrew University there, became very, very interested in what we were doing. And so they were up there monitoring all of our work because we were finding stuff that established a habitation there in that location that went back before the time of Joshua into the Canaanite period. How do we know that? Well, because we found pottery that was Canaanite pottery. We found lamps, olive oil lamps that they would put a wick in. Over time, the way the olive oil lamps were made, the tip was closed, and there was a little hole, and they'd put olive oil in the lamp. They'd put a wick in it. Well, the early ones were just a bowl like this, and you could tell by the way the pottery was made and how the designs on them. So anyway, they came up and they were very, very interested. What I found digging in the tombs was that during the Byzantine period, when this was a vineyard, these tombs were used to bury their dead. But what we were finding in the tombs was not just a burial of one or two people. We were finding jumbles of people as if they had been slain and just thrown in these tombs. I was finding small children tombs, bones with their bracelets on them and little headband on their head and necklaces and things like that. And what we were able to determine based on other archaeology that we had found just in the 3 weeks we were there, and now what the Hebrew University helped us determine, was that this was a Byzantine vineyard that had been overrun, and all the people had been slain and thrown in these tombs, and they destroyed all the buildings, and everything was, because it was just a complete and abrupt end to this location. Probably when the Muslims came in and took over that area, probably killed them all and put them in there in these tombs. Well, I had to dig. When I got there, it was like, here's ground level, and the way they did their tombs was there were steps that went down into the rock. They dug right down into the bedrock, and then they would dig into the tomb. So the tomb itself was about where I'm standing. The ground level would be the roof. So this was a cave. It was only about this tall. You had to get in there, and they had these shelves on the walls where they would put the dead, where they would put the bodies or the ashes of the dead on these little urns on these little shelves. Well, we found everybody all jumbled in there. It was really kind of scary at first, because what I did was I went in there. My job was to open up this tomb, so no one had been in there for a long, long time. So I'm digging the hole out, and I got a hole about this big, just big enough for me to stick my head in to look around in the tomb. When I got down, I cleared out the steps. I went down to the bottom about 3 days later, and I opened this little hole, and I look in with my flash, and I look over here, and I just see a skeleton head sitting there. And I'm looking around, and I'm seeing bones. I'm seeing arm bones and leg bones and stuff and rib bones. And I come over here, and I look this way. And all of a sudden, these two green eyes are staring at me. I went, whoa. Just as my light hit the two green eyes, I hear this, like that.
Cat.
It was a bobcat that had made its way into the tomb and was living in there.
Oh, wow.
But I just went, yeah! This thing jumped at me, and I screamed. I went, ah! This thing ran up my back and out. I screamed so loud that the people down the hill, they were about 100 yards away digging somewhere else, heard me scream and came running up there to see what in the world had happened. I thought I raised the dead or something, you know. But it was pretty scary, you know. But yeah, it was down in this cave, and we dug, and it was very hot, you know, and very humid down there. And
And other than the tombs, was there other artifacts deep down in the ground, or was it?
yeah,
kinda-
yeah, well, that's where we found. We kept digging. We went through one building, and we went down and found another floor of another building, and that's where we found the sword, and we found a bag of coins, and we found jewelry that apparently had been hidden, because what they were doing is hiding stuff underneath the floorboards, you know, or not the floorboards, the stones in the floor. And so we dug down and we found this stuff. Found a lot of stuff, and it was really interesting because after we found a lot of stuff, it filled enough tables, like enough in here of tables of stuff, pottery and jewelry and weapons and money and all kinds of stuff. And then we went to the university, the Hebrew University Museum, where they have all the stuff that they have discovered in the land, you know. And I'm walking around and going, I found one of those. Hey, we found one of these. We found that. You know, it wasn't our stuff. Someone else had found the same things at other places. So we found, they kept it all. They kept all that stuff.
Story going.
I could see why the Lord, you know, I could see why the Lord was upset with the city, because there were so many things that I saw that happened, just reminded me of how, you know, it must have been back in Jesus' day. You know, just all of the religion. Everywhere was religion, and it was just sickening religion, because there was nothing in the religion that I saw that was very godly. I'll just give you two examples. I was in the Holy Sepulchre, Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the place where they built over the tomb of Christ. And in the tomb, there are stairs that go up to the top, and you can look down a hole on what they claim to be Golgotha, where Jesus was crucified. So you had to go upstairs all the way almost to the second floor, and you get on this platform, and then there's a hole in the platform where you can look down and see a rock. And you're like, okay. And then you come down the other stairs. And up on the platform, there was a priest. I think he was probably Russian Orthodox or maybe Greek Orthodox. Big long beard, big tall hat, big black robe, and he must have weighed 350, 400 pounds sitting there. And his job was, as people came up the stairs, they could give him a 5-pound note, which was, I think, $1.25 in our money. Give him a 5-pound note, and he would give them a candle to light, and then they would put the candle on this candle stand. And it was kind of their way of showing reverence and worship for this place, the holiest site in all of Christendom, you know. So I was there, and it was lit just by the candles. So where the candles were, it was nice and lit, but in the corners, it was dark. So I like watching people, see what they do. So I kind of went over, and I just sat in the back in the corner here, and I just watched, you know, watched what was going on. And up the stairs came this, you know, 30-year-old man crawling, hands and knees, up the stairs. And you could tell, and he was crying, you could tell this was an emotional, reverent time for him. He was coming up to the place of the crucifixion of his Savior, and it was moving to him. He came up on his hands and knees, crawled over to the priest, gave him a note. The priest gave him a candle. He lit the candle, put it in there, and he crawled down the stairs because he didn't feel worthy enough to walk up there to the stairs.
He wasn't crawling because he was triple D.
No, he wanted to show his humility and penance and his reverence for the Lord. So he was physically crawling up there and crawling down because he didn't feel worthy enough to stand in the place where Jesus was crucified. And I'm like, wow, that's really something. So the priest, after the guy went down, took out the note, took the guy's candle to see what note he gave him, because it was supposed to be a 5-pound note. It wasn't a 5-pound note. It was a 2-pound note. because they use pounds and shekels and something like that. So he looked at the 2-pound note. Because it wasn't a 5-pound note, he blew the guy's candle out, put it back for sale, put the 2-pound note back in his pocket. And I'm thinking, that's all this is a money-making thing for this guy. That's all this is. I go, we're in the holiest site in all of Christendom, and he can't even respect the reverence that this guy comes up.
And that might have been all he could.
And that might have been everything. He might have saved all, a lot to give it to him. I just thought, how silly, how sick that is, I just left with a really bad taste in my mouth. Then one other story, I was at the Wailing Wall. The Wailing Wall is a place in Jerusalem where you're at the wall that holds up the Temple Mount. It's called the Wailing Wall because it's the only place the Jews are allowed to come and pray and worship at the Temple Mount. And so the Jews will go there every Friday night at 6 o'clock. Sabbath starts. Friday night sharp, 6 o'clock. Every self-respecting Jew should be at the Wailing Wall praying. That's where they all end up. There's thousands that come down there. Maybe not thousands, but hundreds come down there to pray. So I'm there, standing by the Wailing Wall, and it's about 5 minutes before 6 o'clock on Friday. And I hear a commotion. Jerusalem is not a city that's open. It's got a lot of covered arches. You go through a lot of covered areas to get where you're going. The bazaar where they sell stuff, all covered. Places where you go to get to the Wailing Wall, all covered with old ancient Roman archways, really. So I'm standing there, and down this archway I hear a commotion. People are yelling, and there's a lot of commotion, and I'm watching. And coming down the hallway, pushing women and children out of the way, was a group of rabbis, shoving them, knocking them down. So I'm like, why are they doing that? Because they wanted to get to the Wailing Wall to pray to God by 6 o'clock. So to get there, they're shoving people down, trampling over the top of them. There's about 6 of them. The women were yelling at them. The kids were crying. And they're just shoving people down, just knocking them over so they could get to the Wailing Wall by 6 o'clock. And I thought, exactly what Jesus was saying. Where's your compassion, your mercy? You want to get and offer your sacrifice, and you tithe every little mint and every little thing that you have, and yet you don't even understand love and mercy and compassion. They're shoving people down. I'm like, that is just disgusting. And I left there having a bad attitude too. I was like, dang, that's really bad. Then one more story. I'm standing on the street. Huh?
When do we have the Bible?
Pretty soon. One more story. So I'm standing on the street, and across the street was a little old lady holding a big bag of groceries. She must have been 80 years old, waiting for the bus. And coming down the street was this rabbi with a big long beard flying. He's riding a bike, and he spits. And he didn't just spit. He did one of those and spit and hit this old lady that was just standing there. And I'm like, that couldn't have been an accident. He just spit on that lady for no reason. He's just been riding down the street, And I'm like, I don't believe what I just saw. I just couldn't believe it. And I think it's just because the woman was an Arab, obviously. It was a Muslim lady standing there. I think he just spit at her because he was a Jewish guy and she was a Muslim. But I just thought, after about 3 weeks of that, I was ready to come home. I just, so for me, I don't know why Jesus picked, or God picked Jerusalem or the Jews, because I'm sure they were just as bad back then. And I'm sure they're not all bad like that. I'm just saying, their religion shouldn't have created that kind of a thing. And even the Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, it was just all about making money. It was all about selling trinkets. It was all about paying me $5 to come in and see this holy site. I'm like, this holy site belongs to everybody. It's a holy site. Come on. It's the Garden of Gethsemane. Oh yeah, $10, you can come in. I said, I don't want to go in.
That's why Jesus was turning over the table.
Same kind of thing. Same kind of thing. Okay, so we're in chapter 14. We saw in chapter 12 and 13, terrifying rise of Antichrist, saints being overcome, Satan making war with the saints and overcoming them. And the question might be, is God ever going to win this thing? Well, yeah, he's going to win this thing. 144,000 on Mount Zion with the Lamb. And notice what it says in verses 2 and 3. And I heard a voice from heaven. I've heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters, like the voice of loud thunder. I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. They sang as it were a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. So now heaven breaks out in this chorus of praise with the Lamb and the 144,000. And this song is for them. The only ones that could learn it were them from the earth. Why do you think they're the only ones that could learn this song? Seems unusual. No one could learn that song except the 144,000.
The ones God chose to go through tribulation and teach everybody.
Yeah, they're faithful, right? They did what God requested that they do. They did His will during an extremely difficult time. They were faithful, and so they're rewarded. Notice their faithfulness in verses 4 and 5. These are ones who are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Oops. These are the ones that...
It sounds like they were all male.
These are the ones that follow the Lamb wherever He goes. They're redeemed from among men, first fruits among God. Their mouth was found no deceit. They were without fault before the throne of God. So these 144,000 were unique and special in many ways. Yeah, there were men, apparently. It says they were not defiled with women, and that's not a generic term. That is a very specific term. Defiled doesn't mean in an evil way or bad way. It just means they didn't partake in what the world did or does.
God said, go multiply.
He did, didn't He? But He didn't say do it
Yes.
willy-nilly. Go multiply. Okay, I'm going to multiply. No. One man, one woman for life. That's how you multiply.
Maiden.
Oh,
Virgin.
maiden, yes. That's the masculine.
It is the same word. Yeah. But when it says they're virgins, it's pretty hard to miss that they were virgins because it says they weren't defiled with women. So it kind of goes together. These are ones who follow the Lamb wherever He goes. They were redeemed. And they're called first fruits. Notice what it says, being first fruits to God and to the Lamb. Why do you think they're called first fruits? What do you think that means? True too. These are also called first fruits because they were the first ones that were saved during the tribulation period. Remember, these are the 144,000 that are chosen right at the beginning of the tribulation period. They are the first fruits in many different ways. Yeah, God protected them. God protected them.
Would they then have also committed themselves to Jesus?
They did at the beginning. They were right one of the first. They were the first fruits to God in terms of those redeemed from the earth. So I think right away these 144 were sealed at the beginning of the tribulation and went out to preach. Now notice, now we see a different scene. The first scene was God's victory. He's on Mount Zion. He's in Jerusalem. Satan didn't win. God did. And Mount Zion is in Jerusalem. 144,000 are those redeemed from the earth that are with Him. So He's got the victory. But now we see a different scene. We see a scene of an angel. John says, "Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, 'Fear God, give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment has come, and worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and springs of water.'" So we're told that during the tribulation period, not only do we have the 144,000 that had been witnessing for the Lord during the period of tribulation, but we see an angel flying in the midst of heaven, preaching to those who dwell on the earth. This is an angelic preacher, an angelic evangelist. So what is going on here? Well, some have tried to identify this angel, because the word angel just means messenger. Some have claimed that their ministry or current technology is actually being referenced by this angel, that it's not really an angelic being, that it's something like, well, one prominent television ministry named the satellite they use as Angel One in a hope for fulfillment of the verse. I read somewhere that there is a Christian ministry that has a satellite orbiting the earth that is programmed to, when they do not receive a signal from earth, broadcast signal from earth, it automatically switches into a default mode which sends out a signal preaching the gospel. In other words, it sends out a satellite signal preaching the gospel from the satellite. Because a TV station will send a signal up to the satellite, and then the satellite beams what they're broadcasting all over the earth or wherever their satellite is pointed. That's how you get satellite TV. Well, this article said that when the station, the Christian station, goes off the air, this satellite is supposed to default and begin to preach a pre-programmed gospel message. Some have said, well, that's what we're looking at here. It's not a real angel. Adam Clarke, who was a writer in the late 1800s, said, the vision seems truly descriptive of the late institution entitled the British and Foreign Bible Society, whose object is to print and circulate scriptures throughout the inhabitable world. So there's lots of people that have claimed that they are this angel that is being described here. Well, what do you think is being described here? Is there any reason to believe that it's not a literal angel? Because John says, I saw another angel. And what's this angel doing? Flying in the midst of heaven. Now, John has seen a lot of angels. Do you think he would have been mistaken about this being an angel? I don't think he would have been mistaken. I think what we're seeing here is an actual literal angel who is preaching the gospel in heaven to the earth. But notice what he's preaching. Fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made heaven and earth, sea and springs of water. Normally, when we talk about the gospel, who is mentioned in the gospel? Oh yeah, Jesus is in there somewhere, right? There's no Jesus in this gospel. This is the everlasting gospel, it says. Why do you think there's no Jesus in this gospel? Well, you know, before in the Old Testament, when Adam and Eve were saved, Jesus didn't get mentioned to Adam and Eve. There was a reference to him. Yeah. There was. Yeah, there was.
Well, God was. But
God
not
was.
Jesus.
Well, Jesus is God in the flesh.
Yes.
So he came at a particular period of time and did what he did to redeem us to God. But Adam and Eve were redeemed to God, right? There's no mention of Jesus to Adam and Eve, although God did say, I will send someone to crush Satan's head, which would have been a reference to the coming Messiah. How about Noah? Did Noah know about Jesus?
No.
Noah didn't know about Jesus. What about Abraham? God say, believe on Jesus? Who's going to come?
The Old Testament people did.
No. No. You know, the everlasting gospel, what he's talking about here, is two things. We need to be willing, and we need to be obedient. We saw this in Isaiah.
With Abraham, didn't God promise his seed would, deliver Israel or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
The Messiah would come from his seed.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of knew, in a way.
Kind of did, didn't he? Kind of did. So yeah, in all of the references in the Old Testament where people actually believed in God, Job believed in God, Enoch believed in God, the Old Testament saints, David and Solomon, all those believed in God. They were all saved. but they weren't specifically told about Jesus. The everlasting gospel is that God will save whoever will come to him and be willing to receive him and be obedient to his word. And in that day, in the Old Testament, they didn't have a lot of the information that we have today. Today we know that it's Jesus Christ come in the flesh, dying for our sins, being raised from the dead, and returning to glory and returning to this earth someday to dominion over the earth. We know all that today. They only saw that sort of in a glimpse, in a shadow, and they didn't have the information we have today. The everlasting gospel that the angel is preaching is that gospel that was preached all the way as far back as Adam and Eve. Believe on the Lord. Come to him. He will receive you. He will save you. And so during this period of tribulation, we even see today, or in that day, that there will be a chance to be saved. There's no excuse for not being saved during the tribulation period. Now notice in verses 9 through 11, it's the judgment of the lost. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone worships the beast in his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on their hand, he himself shall drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. And they shall have no rest, day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Now, looking at that passage, you get the impression that this angel is also preaching to the world. Because John says, and another angel followed the first angel that was preaching the everlasting gospel. So this would be an interesting message coming from God during this time, wouldn't it? Why is the rule of Antichrist likened to Babylon, do you think? Anybody know anything about Babylon in the Old Testament? It was evil? Yeah, it was an evil one. Yeah. Full of idolatry, full of sin, full of rebellion against God. And so the Antichrist kingdom is likened to Babylon. Made all nations drink the wine of her fornication. That fornication is turning from God, not necessarily sexual fornication, but spiritual fornication. Worshipping false gods, giving your love to others. And notice what he says about the punishment of the lost. What can we learn from God's judgment from this passage? Is there a real place called hell? Yeah, notice what he says. His wrath will be pulled full strength, tormented with fire and brimstone. You know, there's a group of Christians today, evangelical Christians actually. There was a pastor by the name of Bell who wrote a book, and he said, hell's not real. And he makes the claim that all of the references about hell are just analogies. It's not a real place. This seems to indicate hell's a real place, doesn't it? And it's a place of torment. And he says, in the presence of his holy angels, in the presence of the Lamb. That seems a little odd, doesn't it? All these people being tormented, and looks like they've got a gallery there watching. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. Not only is hell real, not only is it a place of fire and brimstone and torment, it's a place that lasts forever. There is no end to it. And they have no rest, day or night. Those who worship the beast. Not a fun picture, is it? But now, there's not only going to be a judgment, eternal judgment on the lost, there's going to be a judgment on the earth itself. Notice what it says in verses 14 to 20. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and one sat on that cloud, one like the Son of Man, having his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, Thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So he who sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. Then another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar who had power over fire, and he cried with a loud cry to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in your sharp sickle, gather the clusters of the vines of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. So the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles for 1,600 furlongs. What we're seeing here is a description of a coming judgment on the earth called the Battle of Armageddon. In the Old Testament, there are references about a period of time in the future during the tribulation where God will gather all the nations of the earth into a place. And that place is called Armageddon. And there they will have a battle, a huge battle. Only they won't be battling each other. Not completely. At first they will. But then they end up battling against God when he returns to the earth. We're going to see that a little further in the book of Revelation.
So this is like at the end of the...
This is at the end of the tribulation period when God now finally judges the earth. There's a couple of different passages in the Old Testament that speak about this that I want to take a look at. One of them is in Joel chapter 3. You look at Joel chapter 3. Starting in verse 9. I have it up here. Proclaim this among the nations. This is a prophecy to the nations. Prepare for war. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble and come, all you nations, and gather together all around. Cause your mighty ones to go down there, O Lord. Let the nations be wakened. Come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. It's another Old Testament term for what we call Armageddon. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. This is God speaking. Put in the sickle. We just saw that. For the harvest is ripe. Come, go down, for the winepress is full, the vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of the decision. The sun and moon will grow dark, the stars will diminish their brightness. The Lord also will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens will shake and the earth will shake, but the Lord will be a shelter for his people. So God is predicting through Joel about what we're reading in Revelation, that there's going to be this gathering of the nations at the end of the tribulation when they all are brought together in order for the Lord to judge them. That's what he says. The winepress was trampled outside the city. Blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles for 1,600 furlongs. What he's saying here is that the destruction that the Lord is going to bring on those that are in rebellion against him is enough to... A horse's bridle is stop. The blood this deep for 1,600 furlongs.
How long is that?
A long way. A long way. If you were to take 200 million people and drain their blood, it would equal this amount. I did the calculation one time. And it would equal this amount of blood. So this is going to be a blood bath. Yeah, Zechariah 14 says, and this shall be the plague which the Lord will strike all the people who fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall dissolve while they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets, and their tongues shall dissolve in their mouths. It shall come to pass in that day that a great panic from the Lord will be among them, and everyone will seize the hand of their neighbor, raise his hand against his neighbor's hand. This is the judgment that is coming on the nations that are in rebellion against him. And it's not a pretty picture, is it? But it's there. It gives a graphic description of the coming judgment at the final battle of Armageddon, where God finally puts down man's rebellion forever. Some people, this really bothers them, to hear this. Does it bother you that God takes such drastic measures against his enemies?
Yeah.
Yeah? It bothers a lot of people. Yeah. But it's there.